Have you ever noticed yourself acting, speaking, even feeling in ways that seem rehearsed, as if your life were a scene you had to perform just to be accepted? You laugh on cue, speak in tones that comfort others, choose your words like tools, not expressions. Somewhere deep down, you know it's not quite you. But you've been doing it for so long, you can't tell where the performance ends and the person begins. They praise your personality, but they've never seen your truth. They call you confident, composed, kind, but never wounded, lost, or angry. You made yourself easy to love by becoming difficult to know. The persona, as Carl Jung called it, is the mask we wear to meet the world. It's necessary. Society demands it. But what happens when the mask becomes so convincing, so constant, that you forget it's not your real face? What happens when everyone around you falls in love with your costume, and no one ever bothers to ask who's wearing it? This is where the fracture begins, subtle, silent. A quiet split between the self and the image. It doesn't announce itself. It shows up in hesitation. In the moments where you can't even answer simple questions like, what do you really want? What do you feel? You hesitate because you don't trust your own answers. You second-guess your needs. You seek permission for your pain, and yet, the world rewards you. The more agreeable you become, the more they accept you. The more you smile through discomfort, the more they praise your strength. The more you hide, the more they call you mature. They applaud your mask while the soul behind it starves in silence. You feel it, don't you? That strange emptiness after being praised. That quiet ache when someone says, "You're always so together." You nod. You thank them. But inside, there's no warmth. Just a cold reminder. They don't know you. Not really. They only know the version of you that makes them comfortable. And it goes deeper. Because when you begin to hide your truth to be accepted, a terrifying thought begins to grow. What if the real me is unlovable? So you suppress more. You shapeshift more. You become a mirror for their expectations. A polished reflection. But mirrors don't feel. Mirrors don't bleed. The longer you stay unknown, the more you begin to vanish. And what's left is not a person, but a performance, graceful, convincing, admired, but hollow. You weren't born this way. You learned it. Maybe it started in childhood, where love came with conditions, where speaking your truth was met with shame, silence, or punishment. You learned to edit yourself, to smile through betrayal, to nod through neglect. And over time, the persona became your protector. But protection is not connection. Safety is not the same as intimacy. And being liked is not the same as being seen. So now you walk through life behind glass. People reach for you, and their hands touch the mask. They praise your success. They compliment your charm. But not one of them has touched the real you. And here's the question that burns. If no one knows the real you, are you even real to yourself? There is a quiet kind of death in pretending to be someone you're not. Not dramatic, not obvious, but slow, like fog rolling over a valley, smothering everything alive. You start losing pieces of yourself, so gradually you barely notice. A truth swallowed here. A boundary crossed there. Until one day, you wake up surrounded by people, responsibilities, achievements, and feel like a ghost in your own life. They say you're inspiring. They say they wish they had your composure, your discipline, your emotional control. And you nod. You smile. But inside, something aches. Because what they admire is not a life, but a mask. And every compliment reinforces the performance. Every applause further traps you inside the very illusion that's killing you. You walk into rooms and adjust yourself like furniture. You dim your anger. You shrink your needs. You silence your intuition to keep the peace. But peace built on silence is not peace. It's internal war disguised as grace. And then comes the real danger. Over time, your mask begins to speak for you. You say things you don't fully believe. You laugh at jokes that make you feel hollow. You agree with opinions that wound your values. Not because you're weak, but because you've learned to survive through invisibility. But every time you abandon your truth to maintain harmony, you betray yourself. And the soul keeps score. So you become tired, not from work or responsibilities, but from the constant self-monitoring, the hyper-awareness, the calculation it takes to stay likable, palatable, safe. It's exhausting to live in a world where you are only allowed to exist in fragments. And if you're honest, you've begun to resent it. The roles, the image, the praise that tastes like ash. You long to be known, deeply, fully, but you fear that if they knew the real you, they'd leave. So you hide, and the hiding becomes your identity. This is where the shadow begins to stir. Jung wrote that the shadow is everything you refuse to be, the chaos beneath your composure, the anger under your politeness, the pain under your smile. It is all the parts of you you've disowned to stay lovable. But those parts aren't evil. They're exiled, and the longer they stay buried, the more they rebel. You may feel it already, in the sudden bursts of sadness, the irritability, the numbness that creeps into everything. It's not weakness. It's your soul begging to be seen, because no amount of external validation will ever make you feel whole when you're living a life that denies your inner world. Wholeness doesn't come from being perfect. It comes from being integrated, from saying, yes, I am strong, and I am tired. Yes, I am kind, and I am angry. Yes, I am capable, and I am lost. You don't need to be one thing to be worthy. You are allowed to be a contradiction. You are allowed to be fully human. And the truth is, the more you allow your full self to emerge, the more alive you become, the more magnetic, the more real. Because authenticity isn't about being liked. It's about being free. Freedom doesn't always begin with a loud declaration. Sometimes it starts with a whisper, a simple refusal to keep pretending. A moment of pause when someone asks how you're doing, and instead of saying, I'm fine, you tell the truth, even just a fragment of it. That's where the unraveling begins. Not the unraveling of your life, but the unraveling of the false self. The self that was built to please, to perform, to be digestible. That self was never real, only necessary. But you've outgrown necessity. Now you need something deeper. You need to feel your own presence again. Not just as a reflection in the eyes of others, but as something solid, rooted, sovereign. You need to know what your no sounds like, what your yes feels like when it's not coerced. You need to hear your own voice, unedited, unpolished, free of fear. And that begins with discomfort. The first time you speak your truth, your voice might shake. You might feel exposed, even guilty. But guilt is not proof of wrongdoing. Sometimes, guilt is just the echo of old conditioning, the residue of a life lived too long in silence. You are not responsible for maintaining the illusion others have of you. You are responsible for liberating yourself from it. Let them adjust. Let them be surprised. Let them mourn the version of you they thought they knew. That version was never your job to maintain. It was a shield. But shields are for battle, not for intimacy, not for love. And here's the secret. The real you is not too much. The real you is not a burden. The real you is not unworthy or unsafe. You only believe that because you were taught to believe it. But what you were taught is not who you are. You are not broken. You are buried. Beneath the layers of performance is a person who feels deeply, who sees clearly, who longs for connection that doesn't demand compromise. That version of you may be bruised, but it's still breathing. It's waiting for permission, for space, for courage. Give it, because the cost of hiding is too high. Every day you deny your truth, you drift further from your own soul. And one day, if you're not careful, you'll look back and realize that you were never fully here. Only the mask was. But if you choose to return, slowly, tenderly, you will begin to remember the sound of your own laughter, the rage you were never allowed to feel, the dreams you silenced to be realistic, the boundaries you buried under politeness. They're still there. You haven't lost them, only left them behind. So reclaim them. Reclaim yourself, not with violence, but with clarity, with gentleness, with fierce compassion. Because when you start to live without the mask, something strange happens. You feel fear, yes, but you also feel alive. And that aliveness is more valuable than any applause. It is the heartbeat of your truth returning home. This is not the end of your journey. It's the beginning of a different one. The journey of integration, of wholeness, of becoming someone who is no longer ruled by who they had to be, but empowered by who they really are. And you'll begin to see it. The people who truly see you, not your image, not your performance, but you. They will stay. They will hold space. They will love you, not despite your truth, but because of it. And suddenly, for the first time in a long time, you will feel real. Not for what you do, not for what you give, but simply because you exist. Because when you stop trying to be loved for who you're not, that's when they start loving you for who you are.